All right, now that we got our passive entry system all wrapped up, we'll get into the blind spot monitoring install here. Let me show you some of the wires that we got going on so you're not intimidated with all these wires here. So basically we have a jumper harness. This is for taillight to taillight connection. This is going to run from the passenger taillight up underneath the Jeep, tap into the driver taillight, and then you have this big connector here. We're going to pop that through on top underneath this panel here. If you have a hard top, it actually should be the same. You just have to remove this clip. Underneath here, there's a big grommet that we're going to access to run this into the vehicle. From there, we have our main body harness that has our star or our CAN connector on there. The side that has the CAN connector closest to it, this is the side that's going to be towards the rear. You technically should only be able to plug this in one way, but just so you're not getting in there and running things in the wrong direction, the side with the star connector is the side that goes towards the rear. That's going to connect to this taillight jumper harness. Going to run towards the front. Then when we get up there, we have another jumper harness, and this is going to tap. One side is going to go to the driver's side mirror. The other side is going to be ran over in the same direction that we ran our passive entry from door to door. This is going to go through that same little cavity that we opened up underneath the radio and everything. And this connector here will tap into our easy DC. This is at the radio cluster, our 12-volt power port up there. We're going to tap into here, drop this down, attach this to our mirror jumper harness, and that's how the whole system gets energized or powered, is from this harness here. And lastly, we have our mirror harnesses, and these are the exact same for the driver and the passenger side. These will run from your new mirrors into the door, down through your door harness, and into the jumper harness that I just showed you. So looks like a whole bunch of stuff. It's really not too bad once you start to get into it. And obviously, besides all that, we have our two taillights that have the blind spot monitoring built in, and our two mirrors that we're going to be installing. So let's get into the install. All right, so first where you want to start is at your taillight here. On the inside of your Jeep, you have a little panel. It's got a notch on it. You stick your panel tool underneath it, pop this cover off, set that aside. You can do that for both sides. And inside that cavity, you're going to expose the screw that's holding on the taillight. And that is a 10mm socket, or in the center of it is a T30 Torx, I believe. Because it's kind of at a weird angle, I like to use a little swivel just so I can get in there and not strip it out. The whole bolt that's holding that thing on, that tail light on, is plastic. So you want to be aware of its construction. Start to loosen that a little bit, and I'll hold the tail light so it doesn't fall out as I'm doing this. And you don't have to pull it all the way out, but I'll pull it all the way out so you can see what it looks like. And it's basically a plastic bolt with a spring on it, and that's all that's holding on your tail light. All right, and pull that out. And this is actually usually clipped into your light here, but either way, you have a security tab on there. Slide that to the side, depress the center, pop your light off, and you're not going to use these lights anymore, so we can set these aside. We have this extra harness in here. This is actually for our 7-way wiring that was also installed in a separate video. What you're going to be concerned with is just the end that was plugged into your tail light. Alright, so grabbing your tail light harness, this is going to cross from one tail light to the other. You have one side that is the terminated end. The other side has this Y on here with this main harness. This is going to run over to your driver's side. Our new taillight harness, plug that in here. Essentially it's just a pass-through. So this end will plug into your new taillight. Alright, so that hole right down there is what you're going to want to access. You have this larger cavity up here. Avoid putting anything in this area just because this is the end of your swing gate. So as you open and close your swing gate, this will actually swing in and out. So you don't want any wires around this area where it can get pulled on or pinched or something. So essentially what I'm going to do is straighten this harness out to be as slim as possible, because I'm just going to kind of slide it into that hole there. Alright, and just keep working it until you get the larger connectors all the way through. Alright, so now that we got our main connectors in there, we can actually reach down from the bottom and pull that slack out of this wire. Then we'll get back in here and throw a zip tie on this wire when it's in this position, and we'll put our new tail light in. Alright, so as you can see right underneath the rear passenger area of the vehicle, I ran my wire right down, kind of following that trailer wire. Right here you can see the exhaust and the heat shield. Basically, you don't have to follow this. As long as you avoid the exhaust system, you should be fine. If you do have a trailer wiring in here, just zip tying it right along that factory line is probably the best bet. But we just worked it all the way down, went up over the frame rail on the driver's side, and worked our way up into the tail light cavity on the driver's side of the Jeep. All right, now that we got that wire ran over to the driver's side, before I get into the tail light on that side, go ahead and grab our new tail light with the BSM, plug it in, and we'll reinstall this. Then we can move over to the driver's side. All right, let's move over to the driver's side. All right, now that we got our tail light installed on the passenger side, we can take our driver's side out. And we'll do the same thing like we did on that side. Pull this light off. Set that aside. All right, and looking into the tail light cavity on the driver's side, you can actually see where we pushed our wires up over. You can see how much more room we have on this side also. This is the end of our harness right here. And this portion of our harness is actually going to run into the vehicle. And then this end will pass through to our tail light, our new tail light. So we'll plug that in. And now we can move on to disassembling the interior panels. Actually, let me get a couple zip ties on here, make it look a little cleaner. All right, and let's start taking off some interior panels here. All right, now coming on the inside of the Jeep here, in order to get this main harness up into the Jeep, we need to pull this side panel. In order to do that, you have a plastic cover up top here that needs to be removed first. A couple of clips on here. Pop that up and slide that out of the way. Looks like we got one stuck in there. Oh, we'll get that once we pop this free. And once you have this cover off, your hard top connector, you can pop that free so that doesn't get in the way of anything. And now you don't have to remove it, but you can pop this whole side panel off. So I'll pull back this weather stripping, and we'll get our panel tool in here. All right. And once you pop that free, this back panel will just snap right up. All right, once you have your panel pulled out of the way, you're going to gain access to this grommet right here. You're going to want to pull this out. You can do it from either side, from your tailgate cavity or from the top. All right, and what I like to do is put a nice cross, like a X pattern cut in the grommet. Making it a little bit smaller than this and just stretching it over is perfectly fine. But this grommet is not entirely too crucial, being that it is pretty high up on the vehicle and it is inside the vehicle. I'm not really worried too much about water getting in here. If you want, you can put some silicone or sealant on there if you're trying to be really thorough with your install, but it's really not necessary. Once you have this wire up in here, make sure I have enough slack on the tail light side so I can plug my tail light in still. And that actually should be good right there. All right, so from this point, you're gonna wanna grab your main body harness that we talked about earlier. This is the harness that has our CAN connector on there. It only goes in one way. It is a sealed connector, so it has a nice sound when you close it. Stuff this big connector kind of towards the rear. You have a lot of space right in this unused area back here. And optionally, you can throw a zip tie on here if you wanted. All right, working your way over to the carpeted section. For now, we just want to get this wire behind that carpet a little bit, and we'll get to that later. But for now, since we have this all in place, we can go ahead and reassemble our rear quarter panel here and put our tail light back in, the new tail light. All right, now we can grab our new tail light, plug this bad boy in, and we'll reinstall this with the plastic bolt we removed earlier. All right, let's move to the middle of the vehicle now. Coming on the side here with your carpeted interior here, you can just pull that carpet back. And what we're trying to get to is this right back here. This is our star connector. This is where all of our CAN connections are. And we're gonna need to pop this cover off. There's squeeze tabs on the side. And on our main harness that we're running to the rear, we have a CAN connector, and we will just plug this in to any one of the free ports on here. It doesn't matter where it goes. And then we can clip our cover back over. All right, and from this point, again, you can zip tie these wires up. I'm gonna tuck it out of the way for now, but you can zip tie your harness along the factory harness here. And essentially all we're gonna try and do from here is get this up here into the kick panel area. So we'll just continue along running the wire underneath our panels, working our way to the front. And when you get to your side panels, you don't have to remove it to run this wire. You can basically pull up on it a little bit and you should be able to tuck it down in there. And again, if you want to be really thorough, you can pull these panels off, zip tie it all along in there, but it's really not necessary. And I'll use a panel tool just to feed it all the way through. Pull this panel up and stuff it all the way down. Stuff our wires out of the way here. All right, once you get the wires in this general area, we can move forward with the rest of the wiring. All right, once you have your main harness up here, the harnesses that you're gonna wanna grab is the mirror jumper harness and the easy DC connection. And basically, your mirror jumper harness will run from the driver's side over to the passenger side. Plug this in, also only goes one way. And the short end is for the driver's side mirror. The longer end will run over to your passenger side. And the longer end also, about midway, has another connection. And this is for your easy DC. This is actually gonna run down from your cigarette lighter port, which would typically be in this location here. But because the trailer brake controller was installed, we have our connection. It's just sitting back there. So we still have to access this. It's just not gonna be connected to our 12-volt port here. Basically, this 12-volt port will power our system. It's gonna plug in up here. We're gonna run this smaller section down and mate with our mirror jumper harness. All right, so let's get into that install. So basically, you're gonna get this longer end of your jumper harness. You're gonna run this in the same direction that we ran our passive entry wires underneath the radial, the center console here, and above your trans tunnel. And I'm gonna try and do this without my white zip tie. Where you want to end up is basically this jumper for the easy DC, this power connection, the one with the red and the black wires. You just want this to kind of be around this general area right down here, because when we drop down our easy DC, we're gonna have the wire come out of this area, and we'll just plug that in, we'll tuck it all up, and then we can start to put everything back together down here, and we can work on our mirrors. All right, and here you go on the passenger floorboard. Our other end of our harness popped out here. You can see our passive entry harness that we ran earlier. We'll just drape this over to the side in that same direction. We can flip our carpet back over and make sure the end of that harness is kind of sticking out on this side. All right, now from here we can attach our easy DC, and basically we're going to pull our climate control cluster and engine run start button. We're going to pull this panel off. There's a screw back here we need to get out so we can get this panel off here. And our climate control cluster, we've pulled this in and out quite a few times, so ours might be easier to pop out than yours. And right in the center here, you're going to need to get that Phillips out. All right, now this bottom panel should pop right out. So right back here, you can see our 12-volt port connector, and this would normally be plugged into our cigarette lighter or the 12-volt port. You're going to want to get your easy DC, plug in the one end. If you still have a cigarette lighter or a power port, you can plug the other end into it. If not, you can forget about this side. This is not going to be used in our situation. And the remainder of the harness, we're going to run it back behind this plastic hump here and down in that direction. Let me run this over. So right across through here, and there is a fuse on here, and that fuse should also fit back there or back through there. All right, now that we're left with this, we're gonna drop this straight down. We're gonna try and get it right around this area down here. All right, so feeding this down through here, you can use your zip tie to run this through if it helps you out, but it's pretty much a straight shot. So you should be able to feel it with your fingers. All right, keep fishing around in there, and there you go. We got it. And now we can connect this end of our Easy DC right into our jumper harness. All right, we'll throw our dash back together and we can move on to the mirrors. All right, we'll tuck that out of the way and we'll snap our dash back together. All right, and for this bottom edge right here, you can pull this panel out a little bit, just because that panel sits over this climate control cluster. There you go. All right, let's move on to the mirrors. All right, coming up to the mirror, because we have our door panel already removed, we don't need to remove that so we can run our wires in here, but with the mirror, you have 3 40 Torx holding this on, and because I'm going to be taking this off by myself, I like to have one left in. What I'm going to do is pull one completely out, and this is this bottom one, and then I'll hand thread it back in a few turns. All right, that's in, and then I'll pull these completely out. And now you can see our mirror is completely removed besides this one Torx at the bottom that I'll walk to the other side of the vehicle, reach my arm around, and I'll remove this by hand just so I don't pull this out and that mirror falls off. Pull that last Torx out, and now we can angle our mirror out. All right, and as you can see, this bottom metal portion kind of protrudes down past the body line here. So when you're taking it out, you just want to lift up on it so this edge clears the metal door skin. And then you have your plug here. We'll go ahead and remove that, and we'll get this mirror out of the way. We won't be using this again. All right, now that we got our mirror removed, you can come to the inside of your door here and locate this grommet on your painted surface, and you're just going to want to pop that grommet off. Don't pull the wire through because you don't have a mirror on the other end. If you drop that connector in there, it's kind of a pain in the butt to get it back up there. So just pull this out of the way enough, and notice that you have a clip here. Basically, you have the window channel here on the inside, the window frame, and you're trying to run this behind or in between this skin and that window frame. So you're going to want to run this sideways there, and we'll see where we're at here. See our zip tie right here popped out on the side, and you'll see this metal bracket in here, and basically on the side here is what you're trying to go around. So you don't want to be on this side of this window frame. You want to be on the farther side that's closer to the inner door skin. And once you have that up here, we can go ahead and grab our conversion harness. We can grab our conversion harness for the new mirror, plug in one end to your existing mirror connector. This is what's going to plug into your new mirror, and this is the wire that we're going to need to get to that kick panel. So we'll tape this onto here and we'll pull that through. All right, now when you're running this through, it makes it easier to drop this down, like kind of low in there, and then pull it from the inside back sideways. So let's do that here. Get that wire up under there, you can pull that through, but once it's in this position, you're good to go. After we attach the mirror, we'll push this remainder of the harness off towards the inside of the door here, and just avoiding any of the moving window, mechanism that's in there. All right, so now you can go ahead and grab your mirror that we got our wire through here, and I know we probably made this wire look like pretty easy to run in there. You'll get it in there with enough effort. We got our mirror plugged in now. I'm gonna stuff this harness off to the left, just like that there. Lift it into position, and I'm gonna reach around. I have a Torx here. I'm gonna reach around. All right, now we can go ahead and tighten up the rest of the Torx bits. All right, now that we got our mirror mounted, you can remove your wire from your zip tie. And I'll throw this to the passenger side because we're gonna need this again. From this grommet here, you're gonna wanna cut on a little slit into this grommet to fit your connector through, and this has been pre-cut, but essentially you just use a razor blade or a pair of snips or something, and the hole doesn't have to be very big as long as you're able to stretch it around the end of the connector. Pull that nice and tight so we have all the slack removed from it, and now we can go ahead and zip tie this down, and I'm basically just going to follow this wiring harness right to the inside of the vehicle here. Again, this is a pre-production model. Your connectors may look a little different. If your connector fits into your door harness, you're more than welcome to run that inside. If not, it'll have this nice braided nylon sleeve on the wire, and you can actually just run it on the back side and throw a couple zip ties on there because it matches your factory door harness pretty nicely. All right, and from this point, we're ready to put our door back together. I didn't put this little loop in earlier, so I'll do that now. All right, and we'll put this loop back in that holds our door harness on because I didn't do that earlier. And then I can throw the door panel back on. All right, when you're getting these cables back on, an easy way to remember where they go, the lock will actually lock and unlock if you start to move it. So obviously you're going to want to put that one where your lock switch is, which is right in the center. And with your door handle, you'll get that in there, you'll pull it back so the cable can clear that plastic edge, and then you'll just push that forward and it'll clip into place. All right, and that's all it is, and we'll hang the door back on the door. Up inside the door here, you see these clips. You just want to make sure that they're not above or in a weird position around that hole before you start smacking it back together. So just make sure those holes and those clips line up. Then you can pop it all back in. And we'll throw our Torx back in throughout the door here. Get that top Torx back in. Pop our door cover back on. All right, let's move over to the passenger side and do the same thing. All right, let's grab our door panel and put our door panel back on. All right, now we can get into the vehicle and finish up with the wiring and pretty much just put the Jeep back together at that point. Coming onto the inside of your kick panel area here, you can see our previously installed or earlier installed passive entry, and we have the mirror jumper harness that we ran earlier. I just got two of these wires behind this big ground wire right here, and I'm just gonna put a zip tie on there and I keep it in place, so when I put the kick panel back on, the wires are going to be accessible for me. Slide that into place and make sure you get these wires coming through that hole there. Alright, with the kick panel back in place, we can throw our 10 mil back on here. Reattach our door harness to this hook here. And we'll go ahead and plug all of our connectors in. Alright, and I'm going to stuff these down in there. We'll plug our door harness in. Snap this back into place where it belongs, right there. Alright, and you can reinstall your door connector cover here. Alright, you just want to get your carpet back into place. We'll get our bracket that we removed earlier, slide it back over there and throw those two 10 mils back on as well. Alright, tuck your carpet all back up in there. Alright, and we can move over to the driver's side. Alright, so on the driver's side, we'll go ahead and do the same thing. Put this bracket back on. Make sure not to pinch any of these wires that you ran across in that little channel that we opened up earlier. Alright, and you can tuck your carpet back down and around. Snap in all your carpet snaps here. Alright, so on the kick panel side, you're probably going to have a bunch of wire here left over, or excess wire. So just kind of flatten all that out and get it tucked out of the way. And your main body harness for the blind spot monitoring system, all I did was tuck it up into this cavity back here. Your main body harness connector, all I did was tuck it in this cavity back here. So you have your main mirror connector. What you should have is your passive entry harness right here, your blind spot monitoring harness right here, and your door connector also right there. Now we can grab our kick panel and do the same thing. Make sure these are protruding out of that hole in the kick panel, and we'll plug our door back in. All right, now you can grab your door harness, loop it back over your hook here, and we'll plug our door harnesses all back together. Alright, now that we got that all taken care of, we can run our Genie programmer, and we don't have to do the bypass, the security gateway bypass, because we already did that earlier for the passive entry. So that's still installed. All we have to do is run the Genie and get everything activated. Alright, and just like that, you have your passive entry installed and your blind spot monitoring. These two upgrades are very convenient and safe. They are a little bit more advanced, maybe not so much for the average installer, but if you take your time, be patient, watch the video, pause it when you need to review things, you'll definitely be able to get it done. For installs and upgrades like this, check us out at Infotainment.com.